Next, we're going to take a look at locking in REAPER. Now we could turn locking on and off from the toolbar right here. We could also see it in the menu. If we go to Options, down over here is locking. And as we can see, we can enable it with the keystroke L and adjust the settings with Shift L. So hit L to turn it on. It turns white like that. Hit it again, it turns it off. Hit Shift L, and it opens up the locking settings right here. Here's where we can choose the parameters that are going to be adjusted by locking. In other words, turning locking on doesn't lock everything, just what we choose in this window. So let's go through them. The first option is time selection. So if locking is turned off, we make a time selection. We can make a new one or edit them very easily. Unless locking is turned on. Hit L, and now we can't edit them or adjust them or make new ones. So our time selection is locked, which is very useful for editing. If we're working on a section and we just want to edit right over here, we don't want to accidentally change our time selection. If locking is turned off, we could drag over here and lose our time selection. But we could set it, lock it, and now we can do anything we want and not lose it. Select it, cut a piece out on these different tracks, and we can't lose our time selection. We could also right-click up here and open up the settings. Besides time selection, we could separate and just lock our loops. Now by default, loops and time selections are linked. So if we go to the Options menu, loop points are linked to time selection. So our loop points and our time selection are the same thing. This is our time selection, and this is our loop up here. But we could separate them. Unselect this. Now we can create loop points by dragging on our ruler. And this is our loop, and our time selection is over here. If we drag in the empty area of our items, like this. So now they're separate. We can edit over here, and we could loop over here. So when they're separate, and locking is turned on, we could lock just the time selection, and now we can't adjust our time selection, but we could still change our loops right up here. Or we could do the opposite. We could lock our loop points, but not our time selection. So now our time selection could be adjusted, but our loop points are locked. But that only matters if our time selection and our loop points are not linked. Right over here. But they are by default. They're the same thing. Now the next option is items full. If we choose this, with locking turned on, all the items in our project are locked. We can't move them, we can't edit them, we can't trim them, we can't fade them, and notice they're all grayed out. This is a great mode when you don't want anything changed. Like if someone comes in the room, you don't want to mess anything up, or if you're like me and you have a cat walking across your keyboard, it could affect your editing very quickly. So you could choose to lock all the items completely right here. But most times, this is more locking than we need. It's not very flexible. So the next items deal with that. We could choose to prevent left and right movement. So when that's chosen, we can't drag our items left or right. They're not going to move. So we can't adjust the timing of our media, which is really good when we're done editing. And we don't want to accidentally grab an item and move it around. So we can just lock that one parameter. We can also lock up and down movement right here. If this is chosen, we can't drag our items up and down. We can't place this on top of here. We can still move it left and right, but not up and down. So our items stay in that track. With locking turned off, we could put this on top of here or here, but with it locked, we can't. It stays on its track. Next, we could lock just the item edges. So if we choose this, we can't trim over here. Notice the trim tool doesn't even show up. If it's unlocked, the tool shows up and we can trim. But if we lock it by hitting L, it doesn't work. There's no tool to trim our edges, which again is useful for when we're happy with our editing and we don't want to accidentally retrim our items. The next option will lock adjusting our volume fades or our volume handles. Let's choose this. And if locking is turned off, we can create fades right here to fade our items, or adjust the fade, or adjust the volume of our items right up here. See how our cursor changes? You could bring it down or up to adjust the volume. But if locking is turned on, we can't do that. The cursor doesn't change. We can't adjust our fades. We can't create fades. Again, it's intended for when we don't want to accidentally readjust those things. The next option deals with stretch markers. Now, I haven't shown you stretch markers yet. Let's turn this on anyway. Turn locking off, and we can create stretch markers by clicking, hit Shift W to create a stretch marker. Then we can grab them and stretch our items to adjust the timing. But if we've done a lot of editing and we're happy with it, we don't want to readjust it accidentally. So if we turn on locking, we can no longer adjust it. It won't let us. Turn it back off, and we can. So let's undo all that. The next options are for item envelopes and track envelopes, which again I haven't shown you yet, but I'll show you quickly right now. We can create an item envelope by right-clicking in an item, go to Take, and we have Take envelopes right here. Let's create one for pitch, and now we can draw a pitch envelope right in our item. And we can adjust it just by dragging it around. But if locking is turned on, we can't do that. It won't allow us to edit our take envelopes or the item envelopes, which is right here. And the same thing for track envelopes. We can create a track envelope just by selecting it, hitting V for volume, and right down here is a volume envelope for this track. With locking turned off, we could draw an envelope, and that's going to create volume automation for this track. But if locking is turned on, we can't adjust it. And we can't create it either. And that's this parameter here, track envelopes. Now we could also lock our regions, our markers, and our time signature markers, which again I haven't shown you yet. But let me show you briefly. To create a marker, just click here, right-click, and insert marker. And that creates a marker at this spot. We can name it verse 1, and we have a marker right here. And with locking turned off, we can move it around like this, put it in different places, or delete it. But if locking is turned on, let's create another one. If locking is turned on, we can't do that. We can't edit or move it around or delete it. And the same thing for regions. Let's unlock it. Let's select from here to here and define this as a region. Right-click it, create region from selection. We can name this verse 1, and now we created a region up here. We could adjust it right here to change the bounds, or we could grab it and move the items within it. Move them to here, and those items get moved. But if we lock it, we can't do that. We can't adjust it, we can't delete it, we can't move it, because the region is locked. And the same thing for time signature markers. If we want to create one right here, insert tempo or time signature marker, this is what you use for creating tempo changes. We'll put one here, and another one over here. And with locking turned off, we can move them around. Move this one here, move this one here. But if locking is turned on, with that parameter active, we can't adjust them. We can't move them, and we can't delete them. So those are the parameters for locking. And where this really gets powerful is you can create a key command for each parameter. Let's turn this on. Let's go to our actions. And now filter, let's type in locking. Now there's a different action for each one of those parameters. Full item, item edges, item envelope, fade, stretch. Each one of them can be turned on and off by creating a key command. Go to here, put a key command in, and you can customize just to turn on that one parameter. So with the touch of one key, we could turn on and off any of these parameters. So we could lock any specific thing with one key. Now for me, this is how I prefer to use it. I prefer to keep these three on all the time. Because if I'm creating markers or regions, I'm not usually going to edit them. And if I have to, I'll just unlock it, move them around, and then lock it again. So I keep those options always locked. And then when I'm ready to mix and I'm done editing, I go back into this window and choose prevent left and right movement, prevent up and down movement, item edges, and stretch markers. Because if I've done a lot of stretching with my drum tracks, I don't want to accidentally readjust them. So now if I'm ready to mix, I can leave it like this, and I don't have to worry about accidentally clicking somewhere and moving our items, either left to right, up and down, retrimming them. But if I want to add a fade to fade this track in, I could just do it right here and fade my guitars in, or readjust my fades, or readjust the level of my hi-hat or my snare. Things I want to do while mixing, because I'm not necessarily editing. And if I do want to change something else while I'm mixing, I'll just turn locking off. Hit L, and I can move things around. Side to side, up and down, or adjust my stretch markers. So anyway, I think you get the idea of how powerful locking is. It's not some weird feature that you don't really need. It really comes in handy in keeping our items where we place them and avoiding accidentally editing them. So that's locking in Reaper. Let's move on.